Hi everyone, it's Dr. Zeus back again to work with week 7 of our series on motivation and emotion. Today we're going to do a very interesting and in-depth investigation. I'm actually going to have to do two videos. This one, where I'm going to do introduction and a kind of background from my own background and experience to this topic about motivation and emotion, with a special emphasis on anger, and a second one on readings, on the academic readings and the Ekman book reading. So please watch this video first. Well, actually watch the Ask Dr. Zeus video first for week 7. That goes over your contributions and stories from the past week, and a little bit of an analysis and a more in-depth analysis in what those examples showed us. And then also the intro for this week. And then finally, the readings, which would be the third video to watch. So this is the in-between video. And so let's get started right with it. I'm going to go ahead and get to our emotion and motivation work template for week 7. Again, use this only as a study guide. Turn in your work if you're in the class, or if you're just watching this video because you want to learn about motivation and emotion, just use this. Again, I'm no longer using this as a grade sheet because it didn't work out very well. Turn all your stuff in Blackboard Learn. So here basically is an overview of what we're doing. The question of the week is, what is the connection between emotion, especially anger, and motivation? So we have this introductory video examining that question. We'll have another video about the readings, and then the Ask Dr. Zeus week 7 video, which really is a good entry point into this subject because you did so much about anger and motivation and its connection between thoughts and feelings. It just tied in perfectly with this week's readings and this week's discussion. So definitely watch that. Access and download the week 7 folder, academic readings on emotion and motivation. Read and engage chapter 6 of the Ekman book on anger. View the videos in the week 7 folder on Blackboard Learn, and do the week 7 discussion board and question of the week assignments as described below. Now we're going to have a much more in-depth description because we're getting into the group presentation assignments and forming groups. A lot of you ask about that. We'll go over it. It'll be very clear once we're done with this. So the actual discussion board contribution really has to do with the groups, and I will explain that. Offer insights and questions on discussion board and respond to at least one fellow student. Again, this can be short, 200 to 300 words. Why did you choose the emotional class you chose for the group presentation project? You're like, what emotional class? What groups? What? Wait, don't worry. I'm going to be explaining all of that now. So on the week 7 discussion board, you're going to pick 3 emotional classes from the 6 provided below. Okay, and now let me go down to it right now so that you don't get freaked out. Okay, here are the 6 classes of emotion that I have set out. Okay, I'm going to do the more in-depth discussion of this when I talk about the actual presentation during this video. So hold on for that. But here are the 6 classes. Okay, sadness/depression, going from the antisocial or negative emotions of sadness/depression to the more pro-social or positive emotions of happiness and joy. The whole point of this class is not just to understand negative emotions or antisocial emotions and to repress them or try to avoid them, but to work through them toward those pro-social or positive emotions that are essentially the other side of those emotions. And the second class, again, you're going to be doing the whole line. If you're going to pick one, you're going to pick this whole line. You're going to be exploring sadness, depression, happiness, and joy. And if you pick number 2, you're going to do the whole line. Anxiety, overwhelm, paralysis, right? Leading, hopefully, to, with investigation and research and developing strategies, to serenity, clarity, and openness. You notice these are kind of opposites of each other. Anxiety, serenity, overwhelm, clarity, paralysis, openness. Okay, same here. Anger, frustration, aggression, the opposite of anger, compassion. Opposite of frustration, acceptance. Opposite of aggression, kindness. Okay, so again, we're trying to focus on moving the emotional states of people here from these more negative or antisocial to the more pro-social. The nice thing is that a lot of us are really struggling with these. And almost nobody tells us how to get here. In research, they're talked about as completely different and unrelated emotions, which is insane for me. So the whole purpose of this assignment is to really develop a continuous developmental focus on understanding the roots of these various emotions, finding ways to engage them, understand them, and then transform them in this direction. We'll talk more about that. But again, disgust, contempt, arrogance becomes appreciation, empathy, gratitude. Number 5, fear, insecurity, and abandonment, hopefully transformed to courage, confidence, connection. And finally, number 6, shame, guilt, and embarrassment, transforming toward positive risk, creativity, and humor. Okay? And again, these aren't exact opposites, embarrassment and humor, but you get the idea. Having a sense of humor, not taking yourself so seriously versus, oh my God, everyone's looking at me. So you get the idea here and what we're trying to do, okay? So, and back to the discussion board, you're picking one of those 6 classes, okay? One of the 6 lines of emotional classes, okay? What I call them classes because they kind of work together. Classes of emotion, okay, and you're going to rank them in order of preference 1, 2, and 3. You're going to have your name, put your name down, put 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, and put your 3 top choices. Now you don't have to put them all out. You can at least use the initial word in the line, if it's anxiety or sadness or whatever it happens to be, okay? So I have an idea, all right? Then share in more depth on the discussion board why you picked your number 1 choice. What do you hope to learn from investigating this class of emotions? How do you think that such an investigation will improve your life? What challenges do you anticipate? The instructor, that's me, will form groups based on your rankings, attempting to give you your first choice, but I want all of the 6 emotional classes filled, so it might be your second or third choice depending upon the distribution of the class. If you have already formed a group of 4 or 5 people with whom you would like to present, share the group's first 3 choices. Talk to them, decide on it together, then share each of you individually the group's first 3 choices, listing all the names, okay? And then talk about your personal reasons for the number 1 choice, to do that number 1 choice for your group on the discussion board. Again, here are the guiding questions, basically, okay? And by the way, this will be the same group presentation groups you will be using for the 20 bonus points, okay? Please read the full description of your group presentation project below, but for easy referencing, here are the 6 emotional classes. So I've already listed them. And again, here are the questions that you're going to talk about up here, okay? Very simple, very straightforward. Again, even if you already have your group, you answer it from your individual perspective. What do you hope to learn from investigating this class or line of emotions? How do you think that such an investigation will improve your life? And what challenges do you anticipate? So just 3 simple questions. You can riff on them. You can do other kinds of things, but I'm just giving you a basic outline of what I want you to do, okay? So number 2, the question of the week assignment is, what is the connection between emotion, especially anger, and motivation? Again, 300 to 500 words is sufficient. If you go crazy, some of you are getting into this so much, I've had people do 5 or 6 pages, literally. But I could tell people really motivated by it, don't worry. I'm not going to punish you for that. If you're getting into it, it's fine. I'll take the extra time to read it. But I want to let you know that you don't have to go crazy. 500 words is about 2 double-spaced pages, okay? So, that should be adequate. Basically, here's your assignment. Drawing on instructor discussion, and I'm going to be doing a lot of that in this video, and then Ekman and academic readings in the next video on discussing the readings for week 7. Make sure to cite at least once. Cite Ekman once. Cite academic readings once. Again, I'm laying it out there for you. You can select right from the video. Something I myself have cited. You don't even have to be original, but I want you to demonstrate some notion of bringing your insights and your life examples together a little bit with research. I'm not asking a lot here, okay? I'm just asking for 1 citation each, and it could be just a line, or it could even just be a quote, okay? and that's fine. I've given a supplemental sheet below on why is anger such a motivating emotion, which you can also use. So that again would be me, the instructor. So that's basically what you're going to be doing here, which you and I will also be doing an overview of the readings in my week 7 readings, emotion and motivation video. So make sure to watch that. Okay, we're back. Let's see here. I just had to take a little bit of a break here. So here we go. Here are the updated group presentation assignment format and description, Psych 370. Oh, motivation and emotion. Here we are. If this class is successful, it will help you. Again, this is kind of a reiteration from my updated assignments, but it's good to go back over. Understand past emotional motivational patterns, habits, and questions. Explore present emotional motivations, challenges, curiosities, and issues. And develop future emotional motivational opportunities, abilities, and insights. We're up here. The whole point of this group exercise is to help one another thoroughly understand the root causes of antisocial or negative emotions. Again, a lot of these things associated with the past. Interrupt the reactive, automatic, or unconscious expressions in the present, and consciously and effectively resolve them, move them, or transform them in the direction of pro-social or positive emotions, moving toward the future, a much healthier future. We've already discussed the 6 classes of emotions, so I won't go over those again, but here they are again. And again, we're trying to move from antisocial to pro-social, from unconscious reflexive, like a reflex, like someone hitting your knee and your knee bouncing, to a conscious and reflective, from ignorant to aware, from ineffective to effective, from conflict to collaboration, and from a sense of emptiness to a sense of fulfillment. So here's the general group presentation. And I've laid it out really clearly so you don't have to go through a lot of mumbo jumbo about, oh, do I have to come up with an introduction or conclusion or it's going to look good? I've actually laid those out for you precisely so you can spend the time to explore and discuss. I don't want you to get your heads wrapped up about format. So I'm laying out the format easily for you and letting you go crazy. Okay, that's basically what it's about. So as a group of 4 to 5 people interested in a similar area, you will select from one of the 6 classes of emotions provided above by the instructor, me. Choose an emotional class that you find personally compelling. You're struggling with it and you want to find a better way to deal with it, so you want to have a personal connection, or that you're just intensely curious about. I've always wanted to know more about this. Okay? You will then discuss and present them in a creative format of your choosing, multimedia, video, PowerPoint, drawing, collage, etc. Again, with this format. A Screencast-O-Matic, which I am recording on right now, will allow you to record free up to 15 minutes. And you notice I said no more than 15 minutes. So you can actually look up Screencast-O-Matic, you can download their program, and for free you can do what I'm doing right now. You can have your presentations, you can have people on the side or in the middle. You can just click a button and here you go. I'm in the middle now, okay? And now I'm back down to the side again, okay? And you can use it to do your presentation if you like. Again, here's the introduction. Why did you choose this area? Do an emotional inventory of your group's contrasting experiences around the area of concern, like sadness or depression or anger, whatever it happens to be, including examining how your sociocultural variables, that's things like gender, religion, ethnic background, and so forth, have influenced, as well as your own underlying needs and concerns, okay, have influenced your various perspectives. Welcome different views. Here it's great to have disagreements / supposed disagreements. I just like to call them different experiences and perspectives because it creates a really rich ground. And you just have to share those things, okay? I'm not asking you to do a lot of analysis in this introduction. I want to know where you're coming from. The different members of the group, I want to see I want you to experience the contrasting perspectives that you have. Okay, so then you can just go describe the nature of this class of emotion, both the antisocial parts and the prosocial parts, from our work in this class, and summarize current research understandings from current directions in psychological science. If you really have another great source that's a peer-reviewed source, I have no problem with that. Just let me know. You'll be doing a proposal here, but this is the outline here. You can split up work by having each person research one emotion from the class of emotions. A lot of them have like 6. You can literally have people doing one emotions and you just share it together. Then I want you to apply your discussion and research to a mutually decided upon emotional conflict, professional challenge, or life issue of deep and motivating shared interest in the area of emotion and motivation. Examples might be divorce, stress of military families, gender bias, parenting, whatever it happens to be. Connect the work to your lives, offering real life examples and contrasting views. Okay, so you've developed an understanding, you're starting to learn to apply this to an actual issue, then you're connecting it to your lives. Okay, show how this process of emotional inquiry impacted your understanding and choices regarding your area of concern or class of emotions. Use your different experiences and perspectives as a group to come up with insights to possible solutions to common conflicts or scenarios. Remember, you want to provide something of value to the rest of the class, not just embroil them in your stories and your research and what you've learned, but what you can actually do with these things to actually improve lives. So, and then conclusion is this more broad notion of developing strategies to share with the rest of the class to move emotions in your area of concern from the antisocial negative ones to the more pro-social and positive ones, and describe the possible effects that these strategies might have on things like motivation, self-esteem, stress levels, health, personal fulfillment, and relationships. Those are suggestions. Again, you could just go ahead and fulfill those suggestions. If you have some others, that's fine. But we really want to know what the impact of these strategies are. So I hope that's clear. And this next section here will give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I'm going to kind of run through that analysis right now by using anger, okay? And it really has to do with the question of the week. What is the connection between emotion, especially anger, and motivation? Why is anger such an motivating emotion? To find the answer, let's look at the operation or the chemistry of anger. Okay, let's look at it. We notice that anger arises out of a sense of threat to one's self or group being thwarted, denied, diminished, slighted, put down, insulted, and or degraded, leaving what feels like a deficit or an injustice or an imbalance, okay? Now, different academic articles in the book pretty much use these different kinds of things, but it is the notion of being thwarted or denied or slighted in some way, okay? Anger tends to bring about an unreflective or reflexive automatic desire to respond immediately without a pause to correct the perceived imbalance, deficit, or injustice. In other words, it feels like there is no time to think and no time to wait. It has a kind of its own compulsion or force, and it's not like, oh, we can sit around and wait for this. It's like, boom. Anger does not gather information and look at the other party's intention to check or communicate whether or not the slight was an accident or simply an unthinking blunder. Someone bumps into you, you know, kind of roughly, you turn around like, hey, what are you doing? Excellent example. You don't turn around and say, hey, did you do that on purpose or was it just an accident? You know, it's kind of this, it's very automatic and very driven. Anger tends to escalate. Anger informs the other party of their alleged offense. Again, we don't know because sometimes it's just an accident, whether they meant it or not, usually with a little extra force to give them special warning to emphasize not to do this in the future, okay? So it's very almost evolutionary and very sort of primal. It's like, don't, you know, pay attention. Watch out next time. I don't care if you did it by accident. You should be more aware, you know, that sort of thing, okay? And then it gains momentum. When you start to escalate, it creates a new injustice that the other party now perceives as an imbalance, and they're sending you a stronger message back. And before you know it, you're doing this, okay? So, so again, see, I'm not doing anything new here in some ways, but it is a little unique because academic readings don't actually get into the chemistry and operation of these emotions. And Ekman himself doesn't. He's thinking, well, how to anticipate them, how to identify them, how to avoid them. I'm saying, okay, let's like literally get into the root causes of it and see how they operate and then see how they express themselves. And in that, learn to move emotion from simply just a reflexive or automatic thing that you try to avoid or try to suppress to one in which you actually learn from that root, begin to transform emotion through your learning into something a little bit more pro-social and productive. So why does anger feel so motivating? Good question. We're right up here. Anger involves a sharp sense of urgency to initiate an action to correct a perceived threat. I have to engage and strike back, or else. This is not typically the case with sadness, if you notice, which is vaguer and fosters a reflex to withdraw instead of to initiate. Or fear, which is clear. Fear tends to be much clearer than sadness, but it fosters a reflex to actively avoid or run away. Okay? So anger is clear, engage. Sadness is unclear, and it's kind of like retract. And fear is kind of like, it's clear, but it's not, get me out of here. Okay? Cognitive, in anger, the cognitive appraisal is built into the anger response rather than being separate or open to being informed. For example, he did this to me, or she should have known better. These are statements which assume that these are evaluations that kind of believe they are inherently right and therefore not open to correction. Here's another aspect of anger that sort of motivates things. Anger has the ability to concretize, simplify, and give meaning to ambiguous or complex emotions like sadness, confusion, and anxiety. It takes a gray situation and throws it into like some kind of photo processing editing feature, throws it into a stark black and white. And that tends to make things easier to take, even though it distorts them. For instance, a child, and this is actually my own child did this, my son, when he was missing his mom on a business trip, which was really sadness, he acted it out as anger or crankiness. He took that gray emotion and turned it into a black and white so his mind could manage it, so he could do something with it. And the gray, it seems like you're feeling around and you can't really hit anything hard. So that sometimes is a motivation to translate sadness, for instance, into anger. So you can kind of deal with it. Now, obviously, parents don't see it that way, but oftentimes that's what's going on. They just think they're misbehaving or something. Here's another thing, and again, some of these are original insights. These are basically my understanding and my insights from my own research. I don't really see these in the literature, but they're very, very important, and they really do help us understand social, emotional tendencies. This is a really important one. Anger offloads emotional responsibility, burden, and distress caused by shame, guilt, failure, insecurity, low self-esteem to temporarily alleviate emotional pain and uncertainty. Look at the operation of this. A continuing cycle of anger, that is, if a person keeps doing that, they develop something called resentment, which is this long-term kind of hatred/anger that can keep the pain of guilt and failure and these things at bay, but again, to the expense of hating or dumping it on someone else, much like an alcoholic can avoid a hangover by staying drunk. Example number one, racial resentment and police brutality. I always ask the question, why doesn't shame of public video exposure of police brutality suppress behavior instead of seeming to increase it? You saw this a lot with the Black Lives Matter movement, etc. And it's a really important question, and it seems baffling from a rational perspective, but let's look on the inside and we begin to see an explanation. Exposure causes shame. That shame is translated into motivation and anger to offload the shame and reestablish authority and rightness, leading to more abusive behavior. See how that sort of vicious loop goes down and down and down and down? When that sense of shame is translated into emotion and that emotion tries to establish the former dynamic, it creates more of the same kind of behavior. Here's an example number two, blaming foreigners and economic distress. Why are Mexicans being blamed for job losses when these are caused by concentration of wealth, automation, and outsourcing generated by hyper-wealthy, powerful individuals? Once creating the conditions and moving factories overseas are not, Mexican migrant workers. They are very powerful people. So why aren't they being targeted by, say, for instance, the white working class of this country, of America? And the answer is this. There is an additional fear and anxiety generated by challenging someone more powerful than you. So distressed people offload their anxieties through anger onto the less powerful. Is that fair? No, but it allows them to manage their anger in a way that helps alleviate some kind of pain or uncertainty for them, even though it's creating an injustice for people and creating blame for people who are not responsible for it. Because that can be done if they're less powerful than you without creating more anxiety, which would happen if you start blaming the people who really are the ones that should be held accountable, the ones causing it, the ones that are actually more powerful than you. So anger, number 5, anger sends a signal, sets a boundary for future actions in relationship. This emerges from a fear of consequences down the road if one does not establish precedent. I see this all the time because I used to teach teachers. The teacher who thinks, quote, the students will walk all over me if I don't show toughness in my first weeks, or if they do something wrong and I don't really come down hard on them. That was a big concern of teachers, and it comes out of this notion too. Anger can be preemptive in nature, intending to send a protective warning to, quote, leave me alone, in a way that can be read as aggressive, again, resulting in escalation of tensions. A lot of times people are just trying to say, leave me alone, by being angry and aggressive or offensive. But actually the other person could take it as an offense and as an actual offensive action meant to start trouble instead of leaving someone alone. And finally, anger is social in nature rather than retractive. Sadness tends to be more retractive. Anger tends to be more shared and social. Okay, magnifying the implications for social pecking order, hierarchy, territory, and relationships. So again, do you see how rich these emotions can be? How they can explain things? How they go beyond our typical understandings? So let's go ahead and apply this understanding and begin to learn to develop strategies, again, for dealing with anger, moving it into a more pro-social arena like empathy or compassion, and using our understanding in connection with the real world, applied with the real world, to move it in that direction. And I'll kind of walk you through this because it's going to help you understand what I'm kind of looking for in your group presentation. So here are terms of self-understanding linked with motivation. Just to give you your basic definitions, and oftentimes these are not laid out there, but they're actually very, very simple. Self-concept is how you think about yourself. Concept, think, right? So self-concept is self-thinking. Self-image is how you see yourself, right? Which makes sense. Image, see. Self-image is how you self-see. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself, right? So esteem has to do with feeling. So self-esteem really has to do with self-feeling. Okay, and finally, self-worth is how you value yourself. Worth, again, value, self-worth, self-value. So those are your basic things. And now I want to engage in a thought experiment about offloading emotion and transferring the burden in real life. Like I said, anger can be a shortcut to self-validating emotions because it can take an ambiguous, complex, challenging situation and, quote, turn it into a righteous, I'm right, simple situation. Now, one of the examples provided by the class, one of the students in the class, was this notion of being angry at someone who didn't give her information, some important information that she thought that this person should have given to her. Turns out when she actually looked into the situation more, the other person gave her the feedback that he had or she had tried to give that information to her, but that she was coming on too strong, right? And had overridden or interrupted or had basically overridden her ability to provide that information. And the person in the class said, well, okay, maybe there's something to that a little bit, but still should have, it was important enough information, still shouldn't have been so timid and whatever. Should have still given me that information. Now, that can make sense from a self-justifying sense. Look on the side here, okay? So if you're going to self-justify and try to be, quote, right, that can still make sense. That person may be a timid person. Maybe to the reasonable person would be expected to say something, but that person was timid, couldn't say it. Okay, so you actually could be right, but still not have a productive or healthy outcome in the situation. So the challenge here then is to empathize, right? Use compassion or empathy to change the situation, right? Don't self-justify. In this case, asking into the situation to say, how could I relate with you in such a way that you would be more comfortable offering me some information? If I'm coming on too strong, what is a trigger or a clue or an agreement a strategy you can develop so that I learn to listen? What's a cue that I could develop to learn to listen and empathize so this issue doesn't continue to happen again in the future? okay? My desire to make a gray situation be black and white in a way that makes me look good can disrupt the opportunity to create a relationship or a strategy or a new way or a solution between me and another person that would allow me not to be angry, that allow communication to happen better in the future. That's why I say don't avoid your so-called negative feelings. They are actually doorways into maturity and development, emotional intelligence and development. If you take anger and you really look into it, and instead of trying to be right, that's self-justifying, you empathize and you use that situation, then go up here, okay? So now you're looking at concentrating on things you can do, all right? Let's say you're right. This person is too timid. But if you're doing a self-justification, you're actually not going to improve the situation. You're right, but you end up not being what I call good, not creating a good situation. So rightness doesn't matter as much as creating a productive or healthy or good situation, okay? The nice thing about using anger not to justify but to empathize is now you're looking into the situation and you're concentrating on the things you can do. Maybe that person's timidity will never change. So if you want to change the situation, you're going to have to change your self-righteousness to be more open and empathetic to deal with that timidity and change the relationship. Now that's something you can control. You can't make the other person be non-timid. And even if you say they should be, or the reasonable person would be less timid and would have given me that information anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change until you do the things that are under your control to create a better or good situation, rather than simply be self-righteous, self-justified, or quote unquote right. So we want to really concentrate on the good or productive or helpful, and less so on the justified and the right. Okay? That's going to be much more successful when it comes to emotionally successful relationships and growth and development. Now look at this. This is a great way to test this in each one of these concepts. If you're going to use the self-righteousness part, what is it going to do to your self-concept? What are you going to think about yourself? Okay? You're going to think, well, I'm the one in the right in this situation. They should just better get on the stick and learn. Okay? You know, when you take an empathetic approach, you're thinking about yourself, no, I need to be a facilitator, an exchange person that can create conditions for this person to be more comfortable so we can have a better relationship. Okay? Self-image, how do you see yourself? Again, you have your nose in the air, you're self-righteous, versus the other one, you're seeing yourself again as a person helping to facilitate a relationship and not, again, someone on their high horse. Self-esteem, how do you feel about yourself? Again, you know, when you're angry and you're self-justified, you can get these addictive feelings like, you know, I'm in the right here. I'm the one who won. I'm victorious. But if you start to gain your, I guess, self-esteem out of an empathetic approach, you now are beginning to actually derive good feelings from allowing another person to be more comfortable and seeing them grow and be able to share things that they might not normally have been able to share with you. And finally, self-worth. How do you value yourself? Do you value yourself being on top of somebody, or do you value yourself being equal with someone? Okay? Is it competitive or is it cooperative basis? Again, empathy tends to be a much more cooperative basis of value, whereas more self-righteousness tends to have a kind of hierarchical me over you approach. Okay. Wow, we're already at 33 minutes. Let me see if I can keep this under. We only actually have one more page, so we should be fine here. Again, the whole purpose of this is to kind of show you how you can move into a more productive position, okay? So here we are, okay? Emotional perception versus reality. So much of this has to do with the notion that if I can perceive that my situation is clear, whether or not it reflects the reality of the situation, I feel better. You know, and in our brains, research shows us our brains can't really tell the difference very easily between visualizing something and actually doing it. And our bodies and our emotional brains probably can't tell the very big difference between our perception of what is right or good, or whether or not that's happened in this situation, and the actual results that you could actually test out there. So, let's say, we'll go back to this notion again of an unconscious anxiety. Okay. So here we have vulnerability, loneliness, or abandonment. Okay. Something like those kind of much more ambiguous emotions influenced by past emotional experiences and patterns and present feelings. I use that example of mom being gone on a business trip for my son, and how that created vulnerability, loneliness, and maybe even a sense of abandonment, influenced, by, his developmental stage, not actually understanding what it means to go on a business trip. So your emotional defense response may be to go away, say, go away, all right? Maybe a perception of a threat, okay? It could use anger, right? Or being cranky to close the anxiety, to address the threat. There's other responses you could have, this I don't care kind of apathy, okay? Or stoicism or stonewalling, you shut down, okay? These are all kind of what you would say dysfunction or maladaptive. They make you feel in your emotional perception as if you've resolved the situation, but it's actually made the real condition worse, okay? Because you're shutting down your emotional capacities and you're constricting things rather than advancing into the root causes and beginning to say, this is why I feel this way, being able to share that and then to develop them and be okay with the feeling, all right? Again, what it does is it ends up undermining your well-being. Panic is a great example of this that everyone can relate to. Oftentimes, panic itself, which is a response to get you out of a bad situation, actually makes your situation more dangerous. A lot of times when people do the panicky thing, whether they're on a fire line, which is running, sometimes that's the wrong thing to do, okay? Or if it's swimming or drowning or being snarled up, it can create a worse situation and oftentimes a deadly or fatal situation. And yet the panic emotion was generated out of a desire to do the opposite, to get yourself out of danger. But because it was so thinking and automatic, it actually made the situation worse. So perception and reflex does not necessarily affect the reality. In fact, it can be the opposite. It can make things much more dangerous and much more unsafe, even though you're doing it because you want to be more safe or to address a danger. And finally, so here's the catch 22. Your defense response in the above thing can actually increase your sense of loneliness. So you become stoic or stonewalling, you're shutting down or becoming apathetic or becoming angry because you're feeling lonely right up here or vulnerable or abandoned. What does that actually do? It actually makes the problem worse. You're more cut off. You're more isolated. In that sense, you're more lonely. So the perception of threat, which was vulnerability, actually increases the emotional deficit, that is loneliness, and your response to it. So what is the solution? The solution really is to stay in the, move this down. The solution is to stay with the originating emotion. Don't be afraid of loneliness to begin with, okay? Where the other one was a vicious loop, right? Where your response was pulling you down further and further and making you more lonely. This is what you call a virtuous loop. It makes it go the other direction, up. Instead of seeing vulnerability as a threat, see it as a place to go into and explore. Develop EQ or emotional intelligence and distinguish between perceived and real. Learn why the perception arose. Your sociocultural variables, your underlying needs and concerns. Have a transformative conversation with your feelings. You can even say, I'm lonely. You can share that feeling, right? You can say, what does this loneliness see? It may mean that you really care about this person that you're missing, and you can honor that, okay? It can create learning and acceptance in a new pattern, okay? Just learning to deal with it. And there's this notion of mindfulness, which is, the Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh says, take your loneliness or take your sadness, and hold it like a mother would hold her child. Have compassion for that sadness or have compassion for that uncomfortable feeling. And through that, have an active engagement and an acceptance of it instead of trying to fight it, put it to the side, be angry, reject it, and so forth. So what happens here when you do that and take a much more affirmative approach toward your feelings, you end up actually developing a positive emotional feedback loop for you, and you learn to kind of rewire yourself and feel into versus avoid the situation, and you enhance your well-being rather than causing yourself further pain. So again, this is an analysis that creates a strategy, or an applied situation which creates a strategy that can be shared with the rest of the class. So I've kind of given you a miniature of what I'm kind of looking for in these group projects. A little bit of giving an introduction, giving some research, giving a background, understanding the nature of the motion, and then you're describing it and starting to apply it into real life problems and situations that you experience. And then you're developing pro-social solutions and strategies that create a positive or virtuous loop into a more developmental and positive or healthy direction, rather than a negative and self-reinforcing loop downward by just unthinking, unconscious patterns that you do to perceive yourself, to save yourself in perception, but is actually making the real situation worse. So that's really what the issue is here. Okay, so often we think that emotions just drive us. We have no control over them. We can't investigate them. They're just the way we are. We have to manage them and suppress them or avoid them. And in all the academic readings and even the Ekman book pretty much just stress that. They're like, well, we don't have a lot of control over them. But look at academics. They're not, generally speaking, they don't place a lot of stock in their emotional intelligence. They place it in their intellectual and mental intelligence arena. And so if they don't know how to do it, they're saying, oh, nobody can do it. But the fact is, you can develop emotional intelligence. You can research these feelings. You can use this research to apply it to life, and you can move forward and help other people move forward. This is going to be great for your professional work. If you're doing social work or psychology, whatever it happens to be, it should be great for your relationships. And it should be really, really great for personal for family, and for personal health and understanding and development. So again, that's the reason why we're doing this class. In the end, I want you to be able to use these and apply them. You're not going to remember the particular research article, but you will remember these strategies, especially if they work for you. So that's my hope for us. And I know it's been a lot of videos and it's been long, but I hope that this has been helpful. And I'll get back to my central face. And again, I bless you for sharing your examples. I'm really finding the delight of finding your stories and going into them. And when you share them, the way that I honor them is by not judging them or not saying, oh, look at this person, but to say, wow, this person is open, they're frank, they struggled with it. They may have tried something that could have worked better. That doesn't matter. By engaging them, by exploring them, we get better little by little. We don't have to be perfect. All we have to do is try, learn, and begin to grow. As you notice, that's how I conduct this class. You know, even when it comes to deadlines on papers, I'm like, guys, you have things happening in your world. My main concern is that I have most of your stuff here so that I'm not getting too far behind, or you're not getting too far behind. So there's a certain forgiveness and empathy and compassion, right? And I don't feel like I'll be walked all over. so again, I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time on this video, and go forth, engage these classes of emotions, and take the time this week, because it's going to be something you're going to be spending some time with, to really meditate and pick something that you really want to engage. Okay? Until next week, this is Dr. Zeus. Bless you. Bye.